you all appreciate exactly how bright it is up here. So, first of all, I want to thank Jason for inviting me to speak in a castle. It's something I didn't exactly realize I had a dream of until I'm doing it now, so thank you. It's pretty awesome. But before we get started, I want to talk about something called hype cycles. And hype cycles are a specific phenomena that happens when a new idea or technology is introduced. And it basically says that there will be a spike of attention and interest in a thing. And then it will lead to discouragement, disillusionment, abandonment of the idea, and then hopefully a return to like a reasonable idea of what we should do about a thing. So about now, I hope that you're about here. Like I said before, definitely happy that this is happening, but as a woman speaking in a castle, I can tell you it doesn't generally end well, so I'm hoping that we'll be okay. So keep your expectations high, hopefully. So my name is Ashe Dryden. I'm a programmer. I've been a Rubyist for about the past 4 or 5 years, but I've been in open source specifically for about the past 13 years. Most of what I do relatively recently is actually going around and talking to people about the lack of diversity in tech. It's something that's really important to me as a woman and as a queer person and as somebody who is hard of hearing, because it's something that affects me. I think I lost my mic. Something that affects me personally, but also because it affects a lot of people that I care about, and I want to see everybody have the same access and opportunity that I've been lucky to have so far. Before I go any further, I'm really lucky that I don't actually have an employer. A bunch of random strangers on the internet are actually my employer, which is a really cool place to be in. But BennyWorks is a company in Madison that helps sponsor some of the additional things that I do. And they sent me here with a bunch of these cool little notebooks. If you want one, you can come and grab one for me later. So now actually getting into it. Did I actually lose my mic? No. Oh, perfect. Okay. So kind of actually getting into it. The first video game I ever played was Tetris. When I was in kindergarten, I was living in New Jersey, and my great aunt Verdi died. These things don't seem connected to you, but they're very connected to me. Because in New Jersey, it was the winter. My dad had to go down to Florida where she was living to take care of her estate. And it was decided that my little sister, who wasn't yet in school, would be the one that got to go. Now, I had never been to Florida, but I knew that, one, it was probably better than New Jersey, which now as an adult I know, Sorry to anybody who's from either of those places. But I was upset because I knew that's where Disney was, and that's something that I really wanted to do as a kid. And as somebody who grew up poor, the idea of actually getting to go to a warm place and a fun place was something that I didn't really expect to get a chance to do. But my sister was going because I had to go to school because my parents were very responsible adults. So the way that they got by this and the way that they pacified me was to buy me a Game Boy. And this is the first Game Boy that ever came out. And it came with Tetris. And so Tetris got to be this game that I played, and I spent hours playing it, and I would get to the end and I would get the different size rockets that would launch, and I would sit and I would play with the volume too high. My parents would get really upset. But I would play for a really long time. And I really enjoyed it, and still to this day it's one of my favorite games. And it might not seem super related to you, but I don't know if you notice, this is Tetris if you only have one piece. And it's like the most annoying game of Tetris you've ever played. You can't actually win, right? Like there's almost a full line here. I could almost clear a line, but otherwise it's really difficult to actually play the game if you only have one piece. You can only rotate basically one way. So the lack of diversity in tech is very similar. We basically have one type of person, the vast majority of the industry is one type of person that is able to solve problems, that is able to be in the room to make decisions and that kind of thing. So it's kind of like playing Tetris with only one piece. So now I'll get a lot of flack for this, but I have the most difficult job in computer science. This is the hardest problem I've ever tried to solve. As somebody who's been a programmer who has worked on a ton of different projects, a ton of different teams, and done a bunch of different things, I have never worked on something that has elicited as strong a reaction to what I do today. I get a lot of really happy compliments for the things that I do. I get a lot of like, I don't really see why that's important. And I get a lot of really upset people that talk to me every day. If you follow me on Twitter, I'm sure that you've seen some of them. that aren't super happy about what I do. So this is emotionally taxing on me. It's a very difficult thing to do. And there are a lot of other people that are working on this too, but as far as industry-wide scale, it's very small. So when I talk about the lack of diversity in tech, I'm talking about a lot of different things. A lot of time we talk about diversity in tech, we mean specifically gender. But when I'm talking about it, I mean a plethora of different things. This is things like gender. Unfortunately, a lot of the statistics that we have only represent binary gender, so men and women. Race, ethnicity, country of origin, age, first language spoken. There's a bunch of different things in here. And this is looking at the industry itself. The white bar being the industry and the blue bar being the US population. So if these two groups were equal, that's about what we would expect as far as representation. And you can see that some of the groups are kind of off. The first three are probably the most worrying, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today. So 56% of women leave tech within 10 years. This is really tough. This is one of the reasons that I started talking about this problem, because it's a really hard problem to solve. A lot of us don't really know why that is. We don't really understand why it's happening. We don't understand how we can affect that problem if we're not women ourselves. We don't really understand what women are going through. So it's tough to understand that. And this rate is twice the attrition rate of men, by the way. And we don't have statistics on any other group because a lot of the money that's invested as far as research and time goes is almost specifically in women and almost exclusively in white women in the US. So it's very hard to get information on other groups. So when I say wicked problem, is this my water? Yes. When I say wicked problem, I don't mean people are evil. I don't mean that the problem itself is evil. I mean that it's a very hard thing to solve. And I don't mean hard like, hey, we should probably put somebody on the moon. That's a pretty noble thing, but really hard. I mean like, hey, it's Saturday, we have some time. Let's solve poverty for funsies. Like, that's the level of difficulty we're looking at here. It's a very tough thing. So wicked problems are difficult for four main reasons. The first one is that we have incomplete or contradictory knowledge of the problem. If you ask anybody in this room, any two people, why do we have a lack of diversity in tech, they will give you two completely different answers for two completely different reasons. They have come from two different places in their lives. They've interacted with different people. They've worked at different places. They've been exposed to different levels of this problem. People have maybe spoken about it to them in different ways. So we don't necessarily understand in between us what the problem is or what the depth of the problem is. But also, like I said before, we don't really have enough research. We have a lot of missing, incomplete, contradictory research because of who is investing the time and the money into these problems. So there's a lot of different variables here. It's a very tough thing to kind of look at and figure out. The second one is people and opinions involved. How many people have worked on a project with another person before? Was that fun all the time? Not all the time fun, right? So because we have a lot of different people who feel like they're the ones that have the answers and they're the ones that should be the one to solve it, or they want the prestige, they want the attention for having been the ones that solved it, we have a lot of people that aren't necessarily motivated to work together or to compromise on a lot of things. There's a lot of different reasons there, and there's a lot of gray area that I don't really have time to get into, but that makes it really tough. If you have paid much attention to this issue at all, you hear a lot of people saying things like, well, this is a pipeline issue. We need to be getting more children into playing with computers and playing with programming when they're very young. We need to make sure that people are having actual access to computers and to the internet. We don't really spend a lot of time talking about our part of the problem, which is what we're going to talk about today. The third reason is that, or the third characteristic is there's a large economic burden. It's that we have a lot of schools that are very far behind in their computer science departments, elementary and middle schools that don't actually have computers in them, a lot of neighborhoods that don't have any internet access, let alone even dial-up. A lot of people are still on dial-up. A lot of people don't have access to higher education, or the level of higher education is not the same quality as other people's. We have a huge pay gap in the industry itself. we're looking at that at about 10 to 60% of a pay gap, depending on your age and race specifically. So how many people would like a 50% pay cut? Yeah, oh, 2 people, perfect, thank you. Thank you for volunteering. We'll be collecting that after. So there's that's going to cost a lot of companies who are looking at hoping to help solve this problem a lot of money just to get everybody everybody to a level where they're all equal. And then even further beyond that is we started outsourcing a lot of our technology stuff over the past 20, 30 years. And we are looking at paying a large foreign populace way less money than we would pay Americans or Western Europeans to do the same work. So this means actually investing money in people so that they can have the same level of life and education and access for their families that we're expecting that they don't necessarily need because they're far away and we don't have to see their problems. And the last one is there are a lot of dependencies here. There are a lot of different interconnected things that we don't think about. All of these things relate back to one another and maybe in ways that we don't necessarily even see. And it's really difficult to solve them because even if we tackle one of these tiny problems, another one might pop up that we hadn't thought about. For instance, I talk a lot about bringing more people into tech. I know a lot of people are working specifically on trying to get more women into tech. It's a really good example, where they will do classes for women to teach them how to program, and then they're bringing them into an industry where I know personally that a lot of people get abused and mistreated. So this is kind of a side effect. Yes, we're bringing more people in, that's great, but I know that we're putting more people into a system where they're going to be mistreated, so that's a negative side effect. So we're looking at something that kind of looks like this, right? All of these problems are kind of connected. We have things like society, class, family and community, education, and industry. Society is kind of the cultural norms and stereotypes that exist around people that put them in a specific class, directly related. And the family that you come from, that you grow up in, that class, you are unlikely to leave. So whatever class you were born into, you're likely to die in the same class. Your children will stay in the same class. It's very hard to escape that. The education, the level of education that your parents got, it's unlikely that you'll achieve a much higher level of education that they got, and the standing that you can have in the industry is directly related to the education that you received, not just formal, but also education that you self-taught yourself with. And technically, these things are actually more like a circle. They kind of build into one another. So if we know, for instance, that people who get a high education, a really good education, they're likely to get a really good job in industry. That means that they're kind of helping remove or erode the stereotype that exists about them or about their group of people, which builds back into that society bit. They're helping change their class. They're helping change the class that their children are growing up into, and it circles back around. So all those things are related. So now if we just take one of those things like class, a lot of these things build directly into class. Your education, your free time, the time that you have to, for instance, learn something on your own or to pursue other interests that you have, the role models and mentors that you have access to in your life, or even the technology you have access to is all directly related to your class. But also, all of those things change the class that you're in. So if that's all that you ever have access to, or if those are only the things that you ever have, then you're likely to stay in the same system. You're never going to escape. And we know that a lot of these things are directly related to traits that we have ourselves. So people of certain races and ethnicities or abilities, genders, the language, the first language that you speak, and your immigration status are directly related to your class. You're likely to be of a lower class than what is perceived as like the demographic norm. So now we're about at this disillusionment point. Like, oh good, you started us out with some funny stuff and now look at all this horribleness. Good. It's like, you went down the roller coaster and now we're sitting at the bottom. All that adrenaline. So, wicked problems have some characteristics that go along with them. One being that we can really only understand them after we think about potential solutions. The more context and the more perspective you have on a problem, the more complete a solution that you can have. And your perspective completely changes the solution. I remember a few weeks ago I was speaking at a conference and somebody came up to me and said, I would love to have more women in the industry because our office would look so much nicer. And I was like, well, that's part of the problem, isn't it? Because then you are specifically hiring for attractive women. You are specifically hiring for a group of people that is going to come into your office and going to be basically, their job in the office is to be looked at. And then are we in any better of a position? It's the exact same position we were in. So your position is that you want something better to look at, and my position is I love programming, and I would love to continue to be a programmer, and I would love to be compensated well for being a programmer. So the solution that he is likely to come up with is different than mine, because this is my live situation. The second one is that there's no stopping rule. This means that this can never be solved. Yes, very depressing, right? Just like poverty, it can never be over. We always have to be vigilant and policing of this, that we can, even if we feel like we've gotten back to a position, or I'm sorry, I keep saying back, if we get to a position where people feel like we're equal, there's still the opportunity to backslide. That somebody is going to take advantage, that somebody is going to use whatever power and access they have to kind of push somebody back down. There's an excellent blog post that was written that is called the Petri multiplier. And this is a post that hypothesizes that given that we have two genders in programming specifically, and they say sexist things to each other at equal rates, how bad is it for each group? And they said that considering the number of men and women that we have in tech, women are 16 times more likely to receive harassing or sexist statements hurled at them. This is given that men and women say the same number of bad things to each other. So it's not that I want us to get to a point where women are equal and saying as many bad things to men, and that men are getting as equally unwell treated. It's that I want us to get to a point where there are a good number of all of us, and we're all being well treated. It's a really good blog post. I highly recommend reading it. The third characteristic is that there is no true or false solution, only good or bad ones. So like I said before, it's not that I want to go and find all the attractive women to hire. Yeah, that would be a bad solution. Yes, it does bring more women in, but it is a bad idea. And there's no enumerable set of solutions, which means that there are a ton of different variables. Like I said, that there are a bunch of different people, different solutions, angles, all these different variables are factoring into how each one of us would help solve this problem. So are we feeling like we're going a little bit up? Yes, no, yeah? Yeah, no, maybe, okay. So we also have something in common with what is termed super wicked problems. Thankfully, we only have one of the things that is in common, but that is the solvers are also the creators of the problem. And this is kind of a tough one for a lot of people to deal with. I'm a woman. I think misogynistic things. I say sexist things. I do things that contribute to this problem. I'm a white person. I think racist things. I profit from racism. I profit from other people being paid less than me, because then that's more money for me. So even though I want to see this problem solved, I benefit greatly from the system that exists. I also contribute to this problem, and I contribute to it existing. So it's really tough to deal with that all of us are part of this problem, even if we want to see a solution to it. So we have to change the people to change the system. And the interesting thing is that the system is made of people, so we can kind of like build on this, right? We know that things like all of our companies are not one entity. They're composed of a bunch of different people that make decisions, hopefully more or less in kind of a democratic nature all together. So if we change more people, we can change the voice of an organization, of an industry, of an economy, of a society, of a culture. So I had that circle up before. Sorry, really bad hiccups. Really good timing. So I had that circle before of all of these different things that are related. And it's kind of hard to think that there are a bunch of parents who are very overtired. How many people are parents? You're a lot tireder than all the people sitting next to you, right? way more tired. I just have cats, I can't even imagine. So there are parents that are working harder on this problem. There are politicians that are working harder on this problem. Educators and academics that are working harder on this problem than we are. We have to remember that like one individual action doesn't really count. We're looking at an entire beach worth of tiny pebbles of sand, right? And one tiny pebble doesn't really mean much. So we have to be contributing in a much larger way. It's not just, I once hired a person of color, so now I'm excused out of the system. I've done my one good deed. Thank you, I will be going now. We have to continually be contributing to this. So we need to be taking a look at what we can do as an industry. Like I said before, we have a huge attrition rate. And we don't even know the numbers for groups other than women, which basically amounts to white women, unfortunately. So we need to be taking a much closer look at the way that we do business, the way that we talk to our colleagues, the kinds of things that we support, the kinds of discussions that we have with each other, and what kinds of things we're encouraging to change this system. We can do that by educating our coworkers and colleagues. Most people are not going to seek this information out for themselves. A lot of people think that it doesn't have anything to do with me. I have actually had people say that to me, like, I'm a white straight dude who lives in the US and speaks English as a first language. Like, it's not really my problem. Like, I don't see how it touches me, but there are a lot of different things that affect the way that you go through life that you would be greatly benefited if you had a more diverse group of people around you, if you improved kind of your quality of life through the quality of life of others. We can listen to the people who actually are affected by these issues. Like I said earlier, with the guy who thought that hiring women for attractiveness was a good thing, I hope that he left that conversation realizing that setting women in that kind of position wasn't super great, and it maybe kind of changed his mind about why he would want to have more diverse people in the office, and not just that these would be nice people to look at. So actually listen to the people and hear what they're saying about the kind of way that they're going through the industry, the kinds of things that they experience every day. Empathy is huge. I was really glad to hear Jason kind of open up and talked about empathy this morning. It's hard. It's really hard. It's one of the hardest things that we can do. And since we're in such a homogenous atmosphere, we tend to be around people that are like us, even as individuals who are going out into our communities where we live, not even where we work, and doing things. The people around us tend to be very similar to us. We don't know enough different kinds of people. We don't know what other people are going through every day. We don't really understand the historical perspective of somebody trying to just make it every day at work, just trying to stay in a job where they're being very poorly treated. So listen to more people, follow different people on Twitter, talk to different people at conferences, in your neighborhood, get to know different people and understand where they're coming from. Work with each other on these problems. This is a huge one. Right now there are a bunch of us that are working on these issues in isolation, which doesn't really help. So if we can get together with our coworkers and our colleagues and our friends and figure out ways that we can tackle this issue together and deal with it in a much more robust way, so it's not one of us pushing a boulder up a hill, it's 1,000 of us pushing a boulder up a hill, we're all much better off. We can change our own behavior. Like I said before, it's really tough to realize that you might be contributing to these problems. It's likely that you are, and that super, super sucks. Trust me, I know. The number of times, like I was just at a conference last week, and I went to go shake the hand of a woman that I had assumed was the wife of the person she was standing next to. I'm like, I yell at people for this. Like, that is a thing we should not be doing, and I just did it. So realize that you're gonna make mistakes. You are gonna fuck up. I do it all the time. You are not excused from this. Realize that you're gonna mess up, and that's fine. But try and correct that behavior so you don't keep doing it over and over again. Try and limit the potential harm that you're causing other people. Use the influential position that you have. You might not realize that as in the position that you are, as somebody who is already employed, who already has the ability to attend a conference, which is a very small percentage of people. Let me remind you, it's a very small percentage of people. There's a lot that you can do with your voice and with your influence, talking to your boss, talking to your colleagues, especially talking to people who you feel don't know better. Like I said, a lot of these people aren't going to seek out this information for themselves, and it's very tough for them to hear it from somebody like me versus somebody like you. They're a lot more likely to get defensive with me because then they have something that they feel like she's calling me sexist. She thinks that I'm doing X. But if it comes from you, you're a friend telling them that. You're a friend telling them, hey, we shouldn't do this. Or you're going to your boss as somebody who already works there and says, hey, I noticed that our about page is all white dudes. Like, I would really love to fix that. It's a lot better coming from you than me. Use the power that you have. You don't realize how much power you have in the position that you have to actually change things, to ask about what the pay equity looks like within your company, to ask, why are we doing hiring this way? Why are we using this kind of wording on our website? Why are we marketing in such a way that we know is going to turn certain people away? You can lend your voice to those things. You have far less to risk than the marginalized person sitting next to you, than a person of color, than a person with disabilities, than a woman that already is in a weakened position because of the stereotypes that exist about them. So use that voice. So we've gone through the whole cycle, the whole hype cycle. Do we feel like we're plateauing? We're like good, like not gonna get any worse from here? You're all like, oh my God, this is the worst. So that's all I have. Thank you very much. You can clap, go ahead. Sorry, sometimes I want to keep talking and then I forget that there's like this social thing where you want to do something at me after I've been talking to you for a half hour. So I'm Ashe Dryden on Twitter. I'm Ashe Dryden pretty much everywhere online. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Thank you for helping me with this problem. I'm totally open for the next 2 days if you want to sit and talk about the kinds of things that you want to help out with or questions that you have. I'm very open. Also, I'm going to post my slides on Twitter a little bit later, some of those resources. That Petrie multiplier blog post has a lot of really fun math, and all of that stuff was run with Python, so it's actually kind of cool, and a bunch of other people kind of piggybacked on it and did different things. So it's interesting to look at. But yeah, do we have time for questions?
Yeah, 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay. I'm hard of hearing, so if you ask a question, you have to project, otherwise I'm going to ignore you. Yes?
So, as a pro-feminist man, I see why you can't lean on the group of oppressed people to solve their own problem. You have to help, you have to be part of the solution. But I also feel like if I use my voice to speak in favor of feminism, I'm playing into this long history that we have of thinking that men can speak for women and have to be their voice for them. So I'm kind of feel like stuck between a rock and a hard place sometimes. What can I do?
Sure, so the question was, as a pro-feminist man, there's a long history of men speaking over women or trying to speak for women, not necessarily for what they actually want, but for what they expect them to want. What should I do in that situation where I don't want to speak for a woman, but I still want to help? And the best way, truthfully, is somebody, I keep meaning to look up who said it, but somebody once said, don't ask me for space in my movement for you. Offer me space in your society. So create space for us. Talk to your friends. Say like, hey, what you just said made me really uncomfortable. It's not like you made Stacy really uncomfortable or you made John really uncomfortable. You made me really uncomfortable when you said that, and that's not something that I really want to see here. So speak for yourself when you do those kinds of things. If you want to give people resources, refer them to the work of the people that are actually facing those kinds of issues. And that kind of helps it not be, it be your voice in the right instances and not in the better ones. Anyone else? Yes?
What would you say is low-hanging fruit?
What is low-hanging fruit? Talking to your friends, for sure. Like the number of times where I've been at a conference and somebody has said something to me and I'm like standing in a group of people and I'm shocked that somebody would say something like that to me. And everybody just stands around and they're like, yep, that sucked, like in their heads, yep. I definitely would not say something like that, but it falls on me to say something. And I'm just like, I can't believe, like, I'm shocked. I'm like looking at them like, are you shocked? And they're like, say something. You know, do that thing because, like I said before, it's a lot more likely that people are going to be upset if I say like, hey, that was a shitty thing that you just did. I would appreciate if you never do that again. But if you go to them as a friend and say, hey, I know you. I know you're not a terrible person, but what you just did was kind of terrible. This is why, please don't do it anymore. So those are the immediate actions you can take. and fix the stuff that you do. Realize when you do or say things that hurt other people and apologize for them. Anyone else? Yes?
Do you think it's difficult because there's no good definition of what success looks like for this problem?
Yes, I do, because especially as people who like to quantify problems and who like to jump into an immediate solution, especially when we don't know all of the different aspects of it, which we are so guilty for all the time, it's very hard for people to understand, like, okay, this is what I need to be shooting for. Like, these are the goals that I have along the way to kind of be fixing this. I have people ask me all the time, like, what is the one thing that if we do it, things will be immediately better? And I'm like, well, we could fix poverty and education and immigration and literacy, and like none of those things are easy. Like none of those things I as a person can do or you as an individual can do. So it's tough. People want to see that finish line, and I know that this problem will not be solved by the time I retire. And that's something that's really tough to deal with. Like imagine if you started working in a place and they're like, we want you to work on this thing and the project will never be over. Like you will never launch. That is my life every single day. Like it's super tough because I want to feel like I'm making progress. And I have no idea because there's so many different moving pieces that I can't see. So I definitely think that's part of it. I don't know how many minutes I have. Literally getting beheaded in the castle. That worked out perfectly. Thank you.